Thank you so much for being here. My name is Heidi Bostic, and I'm Dean of the College of Liberal Arts. It is such an incredible pleasure today to introduce the 2016 recipient of the Lindberg Award and today's speaker, Professor of Theater David Kaye. Professor Kaye was appointed to the UNH faculty in 1996 after earning an MFA from Brandeis University's Professional Theater Training Program. In the ensuing years, and apparently without flagging, Professor Kaye has taken on a dizzying amount of creative work here at UNH and well beyond. He acts, he directs, he writes, he produces and designs for theater, film, TV, and through his UNH-sponsored business, Power Play, facilitates applied theater in workplace settings. He is adept at a wide range of material, from the ancient Greeks to The Little Mermaid, which he directed at Prescott Park this past summer. As a playwright and performer, Professor Kaye's most recent endeavor was a one-man tragicomedy titled How I Brought Peace to the Middle East, based on his experiences as a Fulbright scholar in Israel. He performed the piece on Broadway in a juried festival of one-person plays last fall. In fact, the first time I met David was in this very room. It was a Thursday, I think, and I said to him, Professor Kaye, aren't you supposed to be in New York? And he said, oh yeah, I'm leaving later today, I'm doing that tomorrow. So. Professor Kaye's excellence as a teacher has been well recognized by his students, resulting in 3 UNH awards, as well as a Theater Educator of the Year award from the New England Theater Conference. For his outstanding work as both a scholar and teacher, Professor Kaye has earned yet another accolade, the Lindberg Award, which is the highest award in the college. The title of his talk this afternoon is This Was a Really Bad Idea, Life versus Theater and the Creative Abyss. Please join me in welcoming Professor David Kaye.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how grateful I am for this opportunity and how terrified I am right now. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily think that this would be a terrifying experience for me, for somebody that basically has spent their career as a theater artist and their career as an academic in front of people, and basically being able to kind of put myself in this position and open my mouth and hope that relatively coherent thoughts will flow out. But this is very, very different because I'm in front of so many of my peers. And I have to say, confession, that even beforehand, when Ken notified me about this, and for some reason I always thought that it was called the Lindberg Address, and it wasn't only until the posters went up then, oh, it's the Lindberg Lecture. Which then I started a whole new panic, because I was like, okay, now lecture means that I'm actually supposed to teach something. And so first of all, I thought I'd start off by letting everybody rest assured that you will learn absolutely nothing in the next 30 to 40 minutes. And hopefully that'll take a little pressure off of all of us. Because I don't know why. There have 2 times that I've really, really stressed out about something like this. One was I had the opportunity to give the honors convocation speech, which that was unnerving on so many different levels. You're in the wit and there's thousands of people, but the worst part is there's a jumbotron behind you. And through the whole address, you're just saying, please don't look around, please don't turn around, because I'm going to frighten myself looking at this. But I managed to calm myself down a bit. But this one just didn't seem to want to end. And I think it started from the moment I got the phone call. I mean, of course, at first I was really excited and very, very grateful. But the second that I hung up the phone, the panic began. I couldn't help but think that this was really, really a bad idea. And I don't necessarily mean a bad idea that Ken nominated me or that the committee selected me. Just that the idea that I was going to have to give this address was going to be, in my mind, absolutely impossible. I can't tell you exactly why, but I sort of felt myself in this moment, and my guess is that other people have felt this before, where it's like, I don't have a creative bone in my body. I don't know, what am I going to talk about? This is terrible. And I kind of figure, this is the moment where I'm going to be exposed. You know, everybody's going to see me for the fraud that I am. I'm going to embarrass Ken. I'm going to embarrass Heidi. I'm going to embarrass all of you, my parents. This is a colossal bad idea, and I did indeed feel myself on the precipice of the abyss, the creative abyss, this black hole that just sucks every bit of inspiration out of you. Like, I thought that Susan Dumais' graphic that she designed for this was very apropos, just sort of me looking panicked at the bottom of a black hole. Now, fortunately, this moment only lasted for a relatively short amount of time, maybe 10 seconds. But in that 10 seconds, something relatively good came out of it. The idea of what I would talk about, the bad idea, and I feel somewhat uniquely qualified to talk about the bad ideas. Because I have to tell you, my whole life seems to be one bad idea after another. It started with my going to my dad and saying, I think I want to be an actor. I'm sort of somebody who has described it as sort of the Hail Mary pass of all careers. But my acquaintance and I would say even expertise in bad ideas goes all the way back to when I was really some of my very, very first memories. I think one of the one that sort of sticks out in my mind the most when I was about maybe 6 or 7 years old. And I had at that time, which a lot of 6 or 7-year-old boys have, is like a fixation and a fascination with flying. And I had seen Superman. This was the 60s. I'm talking about the TV show. And fortunately, I did not have the brilliant idea of jumping out a window thinking that I could fly. But nonetheless, it was summer. I was in our backyard. My mom had some sheets on the clothesline. This was the 60s in northern Vermont. That sort of thing went on at that time. And I had to, I'd seen also on television it must have been a nature, I'm not sure what it was, but it was an airplane, and a guy jumped out with a parachute. And I just started to look at that sheet, blowing in the breeze. And I looked over, we had a garage, a detached garage, and I looked at the roof of the garage, and I looked at the sheet, and I looked at the very large pine tree that grew up along the side of the garage. And I realized that, you could climb that pine tree and get onto the roof of the garage, and it seemed like a perfectly good idea. I mean, this was the 60s, that sort of thing went on. So I grabbed the sheet, and I went up the pine tree, and I got onto the roof of the garage. And you kind of know what happened next. I jumped. And needless to say, the parachute didn't work. And I didn't break anything. I was a little dazed and confused. I might have sprained an ankle a little tiny bit, but otherwise I was fine. Now, you would think that hopefully that would be the end of things, but unfortunately for those of us that are addicted to bad ideas, that was not the end. But I continued to think, and we had a big field behind our house, and there were a lot of relatively young maple trees and whatnot. There was one tree that grew up, had a trunk at about this big, and it forked at the top. And it looked for all the world like a gigantic slingshot. Now, being a budding theater artist, a collaboration is part of what we do. So I went across the street to my best friends, Greggy and Stevie Carpentier. Greggy was my age, we were about 6, Stevie a year younger. So I got the two guys a small box, or a box big enough for me to fit in, a rope, and an umbrella. And here was the plan. We would tie the rope to the two parts of the branch, making the gigantic slingshot. I would get inside the box. Greggy and Stevie would pull me back and fire me off through the slingshot. Once airborne, I would open and close the umbrella very, very quickly to stay aloft. We all agreed the idea was brilliant. Now, we might take one sort of take on me as a human being, which is an almost breathtaking inability to learn from my own mistakes. But I actually, when I really think about it, I think what it also revealed is maybe something else. I mean, actually, I guess I did learn from my mistakes to a degree. Because I could have headed up onto the roof a second time. I had an umbrella. I had seen Mary Poppins. But I didn't go down that path. And at the very least, I think we'd have to say that the image of me being fired off and opening, closing the umbrella, it was theatrically far superior. If anything, it was more creative. And I believe that sort of creativity ultimately was born out of nothing more than the beginnings of a colossal, horrible, awful, bad idea. Now, this is going to sort of bring me to the sort of part two of the title. Right? So first of all, we've got the bad idea, but we also have the other part, which certainly occurred with both of my attempts off the roof and through the slingshot. And that other part is life versus theater. Now, in this case, life introduced itself into our attempt at flying with basically a run-in with physics. And physics said, no, you will not fly. And it squashed what seemed to be a very, very good idea. And this happens all the time, ultimately, certainly within theater, or at least for me. I always have these fantastic, brilliant, wonderful ideas, and then along comes life and tries to squash it. Now, I mean, I have to say that life versus theater, I mean, we can look at it as versus, as against, but I was really thinking of it more along the lines as visits. A little bit like the Cleveland Indians visit the Chicago Cubs. I'm actually a little hopeful on that one. So, it's the problem. The problem with life is that you have to send it an invitation, right? It won't take no for an answer. So it's kind of like it's like life shows up at your dinner party, and it's the guest that won't leave. And worse yet, it's the guest that stays there and criticizes you through the whole meal. Basically, what life does is it shows up and it takes this wonderful idea and it just shoots it full of holes. And I don't think that's very nice of life. But such as it is, that's what we have to do. One thing that I have to say about just, first of all, kind of like the birth of the idea is that all ideas start out as absolutely, positively Nobel, Pulitzer Prize, McCarthy, Genius Grant Award-winning ideas. Because they live entirely inside your own head. And you get to fill in all the gaps. It's just this perfect, wonderful thing. Until life has its way with it and begins to take it apart. What life does is it strips it entirely of all the fantasy. It strips it of all of its incompleteness. It exposes everything, and it wreaks utter havoc. And for a lot of times, that's the end of the idea. But the one thing that I've noticed, or I've discovered, is that what life really does in the beating up of the idea is that it allows you, if you can still look at this bloodied mess that's left, you find absolutely something in there that might work. And that work may be the good idea that lay completely hidden somewhere in the depths of that original idea. Now, a lot of times you can't see it. You're blinded to it. Sometimes I call it, it's a little bit like refrigerator syndrome. Let me explain what I think by refrigerator syndrome is like when you're trying to find the ketchup, and you're looking and you're looking and you're looking and you can't find it and you can't find it and you can't find it. And then, somebody, your wife walks up and you say, "What are you doing?" "I'm looking for the ketchup." "Oh, it's right here." It was there all the time. It's just that you couldn't see it, probably because you were just repeating, looking the same places over and over and over and over again. So what you have to do is somehow force yourself to look at the idea from a different angle, from a different perspective. I used to love these little puzzles that were in the Boston Globe called What's-Its. I don't know if anybody, I don't get the Boston Globe anymore, I'm sorry to say. But What's-Its are those little puzzles that kind of usually have a graphic or maybe a couple of words, and you've got to figure out what the famous word or phrase is. For example, you might have like the letter I, R-I-G-H-T, and another letter I. And you look at it and you say, okay, I write I. And you could just stay in that same pattern over and over and over until you realize that you're just on a path that has no pay dirt to it. So instead, you kind of take a look back and say, all right, can I look at this from a different angle? What else am I seeing? Oh, I see I. Oh, there's another. Oh, that's two eyes. Oh, that's the word right. Right is sitting between the two eyes, right between the eyes. Ha, I got it. So this is to say that the good idea may be there, but it forces us to have to look and relook and reevaluate and see ultimately what we might be able to find. The good idea, bad idea sort of phenomenon, I sort of realized as I was kind of trying to discover what it was that I was going to say today, is that it really kind of forms the basis of pretty much any play that has ever been written. Then what do you think about it? I think I'll divide my kingdom into 3 parts. And I'll give one to each of my daughters. I'll take early retirement. What could go wrong? You know, and it's not just for tragedy. You know, I mean, it ultimately works for comedy as well. You know, I'll be Jack in the country. I'll be Ernest in this town. Algernon's a pain. I'll let them know a little bit about what's going on, and that should be that. Now, the reason ultimately that the bad idea put to the test becomes such a useful fodder ultimately for plays is that it ultimately reveals so much about us as human beings. Because the good idea ultimately has the hell beaten out of it, and through that process, something of real humanity gets exposed. We really learn something. We see something that we didn't see before. Now, the good idea, bad idea phenomenon, I sort of realized was sort of the premise of the piece that I wrote that Heidi referred to, How I Brought Peace to the Middle East, a Tragicomedy. Now, this was based upon my 6 months in Israel, bringing my entire family over there. I think in the original blurb for this little piece, it was something along the lines as he moves to Israel with missiles flying and his family kvetching. This is the story of one man's attempt to try to bring peace to the Middle East. Now, this sounds like it was just sort of some fanciful idea, but in reality, I really was trying to do it. Okay, maybe not as literally as the title sort of lends itself to believe, but this was a Fulbright, and my whole Fulbright proposal was built around peace building. And I was going to go there and come hell or high water, I was going to have my own impact on the peace process. Yeah, great idea. You know, and actually when when we came back, and I said, you know, okay, I'm going to write this solo show. I'm going to write the show about my attempt to bring peace to the Middle East. Okay, well, I'm going to do it. And how it was going to start, though, is I got to have somebody to produce the thing. You know, I just wasn't going to do it on my own. And I'm kind of that way. Some people will write the thing and then find somebody to do it, and I'm just not like that. I was going to find somebody to do it and then figure out what the heck I was doing. Another great idea. So I have a friend, Stephanie Nugent, who was the executive producer of a company called Actors Theatre of New England. It operates out of the West End Theatre in Portsmouth. And she has a lovely season that happens right around the end of summer and early October. And she does solo shows, or has had other people do solo shows. I said, this is perfect. So I called up Stephanie, and I said, look, okay, here's the thing. I don't have anything written. And I don't sort of have an idea, but I got a title. Here's the title, How I Brought Peace to the Middle East, a Tragic Comedy. Will you produce it? And Stephanie said, sure. Stephanie, too, is no stranger to the bad ideas. So about midsummer, after getting done other projects, I finally sat down to try to write this thing, and I wrote, and I got a draft done, and I sat down to read it, and I got 10 pages into it, and I almost fell over backwards because it was so horribly awful. Awful. I could not imagine putting myself in, couldn't imagine just subjecting any audience to this piece of dreck. And where's my props? I had my cell phone out, and I'm not making this up. I called, went to my contacts, and I was ready to call Stephanie and say, Stephanie, I am so sorry, but what we have on our hands is a really, really horrible idea. And you know what? The play isn't supposed to go up for 2 months. That's plenty of time to find something else to go in there. And I apologize profusely. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it coming. But for some reason, my hand guided back over to the contacts, and I didn't punch up Stephanie. I instead contacted Jeff Kinghorn, Deb Kinghorn's husband, who happens to be an amazing playwright and director. And I said, okay, Jeff, would you mind coming here and listening to this horrible thing that I have created, and just tell me if I should just stop now and save all of us a lot of grief. And Jeff said, okay. And he came over and he listened to the play, and I forced myself to read the whole thing. And when it was done, I think about 2.5 hours later, it was very long, Jeff said, no, there's a play in here. And what he was really saying to me is that somewhere in there was a good idea. Now, it took a lot of time to try to get there, but eventually we did. And I'd like to sort of bring out a couple of excerpts from this piece because the text itself and the focus ultimately of what I was really trying to say was really nothing more than the history of my bad ideas over the 6 months that I was in Israel. The first flash that this whole thing was a really bad idea came when I sort of had a little image of my friend Greggy. Remember my young friend who helped me with the slingshot project? Greggy was actually very, very wise, and I could just almost imagine him at age 6 and what he would have to say about my great idea about moving the entire family over to Israel for 6 months. Jizom Kromani, David! By the way, that's how they talk in northern Vermont. I know it sounds weird, but sort of a bastardized Canadian accent, but this is what I'm saying. Jizom Kromani, David! No! Don't go there! Jizom, they're all crazy, they are. Yes! Jizom, I think it comes from all the dust they breathe in. Yeah, it happened to Moses, when he went up to Mount Sinai, he went up to that big mountain, he got the 10 Commandments. Yeah, I think that's why they call it Mount Sinus. I would have done so well if I had just heeded his warning, but alas, that was not going to be the case. Actually, I should have known because I had actually taken a little sort of preemptive strike at peace in about 1987. And Mary and I, we weren't married yet. We were doing our backpack thing through Europe, and we ended up taking deck passage from Greece to Haifa. And then we made our way ultimately down to Jerusalem, and we arrived in Jerusalem the day after the first Intifada hit the old city. Timing is everything, isn't it? Now, I don't exactly know why. We were there for a couple of days. Things were getting very, very tense. And Mary had the idea that she wanted to go see the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus was arrested. Now, did we know where the Garden of Gethsemane was? Of course not. Did that stop us? No. We are the history of bad ideas. So we left the old city. heading out the west gate, and we headed west because that was pretty much where we figured we needed to go. And we kind of just went over one hill and down another hill and up another hill and down, just westward ho. I don't know exactly how, but we seemed to miss the sign that was posted over there by the gate that said, "Idiot tourists. You are now entering the occupied West Bank," home to a lot of really pissed off Arabs who were not too happy with Americans right now. I mean, no sooner had we kind of come to that realization that we noticed that we were entirely surrounded by Palestinians, mostly women and kids, but still, and they started talking, and then they started sort of yelling at us in Arabic. And none of us spoke Arabic, and we had no idea what they were saying, and it started getting louder and a little more tense, and we did what most Americans would do in such a situation. We smiled. And we waved. And then as soon as we had a split second where we could, we just got out of there as quickly as we could, only to see this car that started driving towards us, and it seemed like it was picking up speed, and it's definitely driving towards us, and we can see two guys in the driver's seat, and they're coming right at us, and at the last second they swerve off to one direction, but not until the guy in the passenger seat, he sort of mimes machine gun fire at us. Okay, at this point we know this is really hostile and we have got to get out of here. But now we're totally lost in this complete tangle of streets, and now, oh great. There's like 7 guys and they're coming right at us, and they're kind of agitated and they're sweaty, and then all of a sudden this one guy bolts out and says, no, don't go that way, go this way, Jews that way. We were like, but that's where we just got like pretend shot at and yelled at, and next thing we know, these guys have blown past us, and then we see this kid. I don't know, he's like maybe, 8, 9 years old. You know, and I think you can see the panic in our eyes. Hey, you guys. Hey, are you lost? Are you trying to find your way back to the old city? Oh, that's no problem. No, just go down this road here, and when you get to the bottom of the road, go left. But don't go right. If you go right, you go right to where the riot was happening. I think there still might be tear gas. So go that way. Don't go that way. Hey, you guys. Don't worry. No. Just a little problem between Jews and Arabs. And that was like almost 30 years and 2 intifadas ago. You know, and as we were going to head to Israel, you know, I sort of realized, kind of putting all of this together, that, you know, for just about every event that it seems to happen in the Middle East, there is, you know, sort of a Jewish Israeli version of what happened, and then there is a Palestinian version of what happened. And the crazy thing is, and perhaps because it's all interpretation, both of them can be seen as relatively right, correct. So I came up with a good idea. I mean, a great idea. I mean, an absolutely brilliant, Pulitzer Prize winning, Nobel Prize winning idea that we have to move beyond interpretation and get down to hard facts. Ladies and gentlemen, what you see before you is the mathematical equation to bring peace to the Middle East. Now, first off, we have to divide our Palestinian contingency between the Palestinian Muslims and the Palestinian Christians, but we also have to remember that we also have the Druze and the Bedouin. Now, on the Israeli side of things, we have, on the Arab side, we have the Arab Israeli Muslims and the Arab Israeli Christians. Now, if we look at the Jewish side of the equations, we can divide the Jews up into basically 2 basic categories. We've got well, really 3. We've got the Jew ultra-conservatives, the Jewish Orthodox, and then we have the Jewish, I really don't give a damn about religion, better known as the Jewish seculars. Now, this gives us an RC ratio of approximately 98%. RC being River City. Yeah. For those that aren't quite making the musical theater connection, as in we got trouble. Right. Now, 1948 is when we have the UN resolution that divides this land into two separate states. Now, if you are Israeli after the war, we are not going to look at this as the War of Independence, but if you happen to be on the Arab side of the equation, we're going to refer to this as Al-Nakba, or the catastrophe. The catastrophe leads to nothing less than 59 refugee camps. These are going to represent 5.5 million people separated between three countries, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. This is ultimately going to equivalent into a headache that is not going to be resolved by 2 aspirin or 1 good slug of whiskey. Now, looking back over to the Jewish side of the equation, there are 13 million Jews worldwide. They represent 0.2% of the worldwide population. However, in Israel, they are 75% of the concentration of that country. That is the largest concentration of any country on earth. Now, on the contrast, on the very other side of that, the country with the fewest amount of Jews just happens to be Afghanistan. That has exactly 2 Jews. And I am not making this up. They can't stand each other and have set up separate congregations. Now, since 1948, there have been no less than 7 wars. The main participant of these wars have been the PLO, the PFP, the PLP, the PLF, the PPP, the IDF, the CIA, but as far as we know, not the PTA, the NRA, or the ASPCA. There have been Jews in this area ever since there have been Jews. There have been Arabs in this area ever since there have been Arabs. Sometimes they've gotten along and sometimes they haven't. 87% of all Arabs are convinced that the Jews are wrong 100% of the time. 98% of all Arabs believe that the Jews are wrong 100% of the time. Now, if we take all of this correlation together, we discover that there is one and only one common denominator. They all drive like they have a death wish. Their famous or most favorite sources of weapon are the Toyota, the Mazda, the Ford, but the most coveted of all, the Mercedes. Yes, I can tell by your reaction that we can conclude one conclusion from this calculation. I don't really know the first thing about mathematics, and I should not be allowed near a whiteboard under any circumstances. Hey. Now, the search for the common denominator was the next great idea. It was a good idea. I mean, if I could find the common denominator, that would be the source to bring everybody together. And we lived in Beersheba, in the south part of Israel, and we had the opportunity to actually see the common denominator in action. It was amazing. It was this little school that brought together Jewish kids and Arab kids, and they taught in Hebrew, they taught in Arabic, and we were invited to go on this field trip with the teachers and the students and the parents, and it was remarkable. I mean, I was actually going to see it in operation. And it was under these circumstances that I made the most miraculous discovery. How easy it is to completely humiliate yourself in 2 cultures simultaneously. Oh, Professor Kaye. Oh, he's a very nice person, a very good person, yes. A bit confused, perhaps, but very sweet. You see, I was having a little discussion with his wife, Mary. We were talking about my daughter, who is 13 years old, and she wants to spend the summer in America. And I thought perhaps a summer camp would be appropriate. And Professor Kaye immediately began suggesting several Jewish camps that he knew of in New England, where he is from. I could see in his wife, Mary, she was frantic in her eyes, trying to speak but without words. You understand? You see, I'm not Jewish. I'm Muslim and Arab. Perhaps my hijab confused him. He maybe thought I was Jewish Orthodox, but the Jewish Orthodox, they cover their hair very, very differently. Oh, it's not so bad. No, he's a good person. Yes, just a bit, what's that word? You know, the blonde girl movie, Clueless, yes. Not so bad. Now, I really wish I could tell you that I was making this stuff up. I'm afraid that was not the case. These things happen. These ideas were put to the test. And ultimately, what remained became something else, transformed into something else. You know, I think this is ultimately what has to happen to any idea. I just happen to be covering this subject a little bit with my directing class right now. And I talk a little bit about what I refer to as the director's cycle. You know, and it's basically make, test, improvise, and remake. I think I got it from a guy named Francis Hodge who started that. Make, test, improvise, remake. Now, make is the original idea. Test, okay, let's sick life on it. Let's see what really happens. During that process, ultimately, we really see what occurs. You know, I mean, the thing about ideas, as they live ultimately in the back of the brain waves, is that they've got to come out, and we've got to deal with ultimately what comes out. You know, it's like if an artist approaches a canvas, you know, and the canvas is, you know, beautiful, it's pristine, it's white, it's lovely, and it's emptiness. And ultimately, the artist who's got the whole thing embedded there has got to ultimately make what Anne Bogart, the wonderful director, calls a violent act. The artist has got to like dip the brush into the red paint and gash the canvas. And it is not going back ever again. And out comes the idea. It flows out. Bam, bam, bam. Maybe it comes in fits and starts. Maybe it comes out as a torrent, but out it comes. And when you look at it, wow, it's ugly. And I don't mean ugly as in like, you know, I'm trying to show how life is ugly and I'm being ironic kind of ugly. I just mean really ugly, yuck. But as you look at it and you realize somewhere in there is the idea, is the painting, and you go back and you rework and you rework and you rework. Make, test, life. Improvise. Now, improvise I don't necessarily mean like in the literal sense, but improvise as in, okay, we got to go off script now. You know, it's like, I don't know, if you're fishing in shallow waters, and you've always caught fish in the shallow waters, and now all of a sudden the fish aren't there. You know, because way out in the deeper waters may be where they could have gone. Now, the problem is that out in those deeper waters, we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, anything can happen. Instinctually, we don't want to go there. That's dangerous. I don't know, I may lose sight of land. A storm may blow in and I might not be able to get back in time. Anything could happen. So I could play it safe. I could just stay in my shallow waters and keep fishing there, but I know what the results are going to be. Less and less fish. There's no guarantee just because I go out to the deeper, more dangerous waters that I'm going to catch anything, but at the very least, I know that the possibilities exist out there, beyond the storm. And to me, that's where art lives, beyond the storm, on the other side of the storm, on the other side of the abyss. And it's a dangerous journey to get over there. So, we go there, and we learn what we learn, and we go back and we remake, and we go back again, and we test, and we remake, and improvise, and on and on and on. Usually it works. Usually it brings us to the great idea. But not always. A number of years ago, I was doing a piece called "And God Said Expletive." I actually kind of realized that maybe this whole human experiment was really a bad idea right off the bat. You know, I always said in my earlier play, you know, that I always thought that God kind of rushed it. I mean, it's really 6 days? You know, I would have just taken 6 days just for planning. You know, I always thought a feasibility study would have been a really good idea. You know, then take a day off, and then get started. You measure twice, cut once. So this play that I was working on which was loosely based on a book called God, a Biography by Jack Miles, I think his name is. And it sort of looks at God as a literary character, sort of the protagonist of his own story. A very, very human version of God. And that's sort of what started this whole process as we began to work on this piece. I co-wrote it with a very dear friend, Oded Gross. And Oded, isn't that a great name? Oded has the best name in the world. And Oded first created this piece when we were both at Brandeis. He was an undergrad, I was a graduate student. And it was part of something we called After Hours. It was like a cabaret after performances. You want to talk about bad ideas? The theater department used to buy a keg for this. And then leave. It was like, have a good time, guys. It's too late for us. Here's beer. Enjoy yourself. Yeah. And then the next year, they said, okay, we're not going to get a keg. It wasn't because like all of a sudden they realized it was a bad idea. It's because of budget cuts. So you can get the keg if you get it with your own money. And then finally in the third year, they said, okay, you can get the keg, but if some undergrad wraps their car around a tree, whoever buys the keg is liable. And that was the end of the kegs. All right, enough of that bad story. So we had this wonderful piece, and then he was going to actually put the scene in an earlier play that he had created called Genesis, but he ended up not using it. And so when Oda and I were collaborating on this piece, I said, Oda, this piece, this is the opening. This is the beginning of the play. Great. And so we started to working on it, and we did some rewriting of it, and we cast it in different ways, directed it in different ways, make, test, improvise, make, test, improvise. We just kept working. Finally, we were at the 11th hour, and I mean this literally, 11 o'clock at night, the night before we open. And I'm realizing I got a bad idea on my hands, and that this piece doesn't work. And I got to tell you, I left one thing off of my cycle, which is make, test, improvise, and then if it still don't work, cut. But when you've worked on something that much, you've invested so much, cut hurts like chopping off a limb. So we cut it. Well, in honor of today's theme, the bad idea, I thought maybe after 15 years, I can see head shaking right now. Don't do it, don't do it. I thought it was time to take the scene out and put it in front of all of you. We're going to do the test. We're going to see what happens. Right now, I'm kind of wishing I was Catholic because I would cross myself. I might do it anyway. So with some help from my colleague and also a theater and dance alum, C.J. Lewis, we're going to present to you 7-Eleven Heaven.
Hey, Janice, can you please send in the next applicant? Hey there. Hey, you are?
Jehovah.
Jehovah, Mr. Jehovah. Damn glad to meet you. My name's Buck Wordy. Hey, can I get you anything? A coffee?
No.
A cigar?
No.
All right, great, we'll have a sit.
No.
Sit.
Oh, me. Oh, yes, right. Thought you meant, sorry. Yeah. Great.
Okay. Yeah. Mr. Jehovah,
Yeah.
did you fill out an application?
Yes.
Let's see. Here. Great. Can I have it?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you meant a recommendation.
Oh, you got a recommendation?
No.
Right. Why don't we fill out one of those applications right now? Huh?
Good.
Which will only take a minute here. Okay. Can I get your name?
God.
Your name? I'm sorry.
God.
Oh, your name's God.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So G-O-D-D.
Actually, just one D. It's actually G-D if you want to get technical.
The hyphen?
Yeah.
Okay. Hyphen. All right. G-D Jehovah.
Right.
Okay. Hey, what kind of name is that? Is that French? Yeah? I thought I heard a little umlaut in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, not that it matters. So, God, I can call you God?
Oh, yes, sure. Yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Well, we here at 7-Eleven, we don't care. We really don't care where you're from, as long as you work.
Oh.
You can do the work.
Oh, yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Verdi.
That's great. That's what I like to hear. Okay. So, on to this application here. What's your phone number?
I'm sorry, but my number.
Yeah. Well, I know mine.
Right. Sorry, I thought you meant right. Yeah. Well, I don't have a phone number.
You don't have a phone number.
Well, actually, I don't have a phone.
You don't. No phone, Mr. Jehovah. How do you expect people to get in touch with you?
Oh, usually they just pray.
Say they pray.
Yeah. Or sometimes they use the shofar.
I beg your pardon?
Or sometimes they just cover themselves with ash and climb up to the top of Mount Sinai and yell, "Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo!" Or you could just call my service. That's 207-3352.
207-3352. Okay, great. Okay, so now, can I have your address?
My address. Well, I'm omnipresent.
Okay, omnipresent. What's that? It's in Jersey, right? Yeah. You know, we got a summer house out there. Our kids love that. Great. Omnipresent, New Jersey. Okay. And I hope you don't mind, but I just need your religion.
I'm sorry, my religion?
Yes. What do you believe?
Oh, well, I guess I believe in me.
Buddhists, nice. Yeah, we got plenty of those here.
But Mr. Wordy, I'm afraid you don't understand. I'm God. You know, God, the supreme being.
Supreme being, huh? Well, let me tell you something, Mr. God, Mr. Jehovah, if that is your real name. Look, you may be the supreme being in omnipresent New Jersey, but in these 7-Eleven stores, I am the chief chap, capiche? Supreme being. You can't even imagine. Let me tell you something. I am the head of personnel for every 7-Eleven in New Jersey, New York, and parts of Connecticut. Does that impress you?
Yeah, wow.
Good. It should. You know, I worked hard to get to where I am, and it took me years. I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day, right?
One day? No.
And I am getting sick and tired of all these young go-getters thinking that they own the world. You don't think you own the world, do you, God?
No, sir.
Good. So, did you bring your resume?
I'm sorry, my resume?
Yes, a resume, a list of your accomplishments.
Oh, yes, right, of course.
What is this?
It's a book.
Yeah, I can see that it's a book.
It's a good book.
So it looks like you wrote your name entirely in the third person. If you wrote this, why is your name in the third person? I mean, it says, look, it says right here, okay, so it says you created the world, you created the heavens, the earth, you created the flowers and the trees. Okay, can you work a cash register?
I'm pretty sure, Mr. Wordy.
It's computerized.
Oh, okay. I think I can handle it.
Are you sure? Because I'm not seeing that listed anywhere in your book.
I've been meaning to add that.
Here, we can do this. Look. Can work a computerized cash register, Psalms 14. There we go. Okay, so I need to know, do you have any disabilities?
No.
Are you a U.S. veteran?
No.
Do you have a record?
Well, my greatest hits are coming out next week.
That's not what I meant.
Just making a little joke.
Joke. Okay. Okay. Do you have an aversion to selling cigarettes?
No.
Alcohol?
No.
Playboy?
No.
How about Penthouse, Hustler, Jugs, Boobs and Butts, Letters from Hell, Mothers and Daughters, Fathers and Sons, or Farm Animal Spectacular?
No.
How about The Post? Ooh. Yeah, me too. I never felt comfortable about that myself. Okay, let me see. So it says here that, so you can squeeze water from a stone. Can you make a Slurpee?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I know exactly what a Slurpee is.
You don't know what a Slurpee is?
I know.
You don't know what a Slurpee is? Hell, man, what? Are you from another planet? Jesus Christ!
You work here too?
Drink that.
I'm really
Drink
not,
it.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite good.
That, my friend, is a Slurpee. It is the foundation of the 7-Eleven way of life. This ain't no beef jerky, right? You, if you work here, will be responsible to know every size, every flavor, every price by heart. You will, mon ami, be required to cultivate an unending reverence for this chilly little beverage, the likes of which you have never known. Do you understand?
Yes, sir. That ain't no beef jerky.
Good. Good. Great. Okay. Hypothetical situation. A man walks into the store. He's wearing a ski mask. He has a shotgun in his hand. What do you do?
Okay. Is this man a sinner?
Well, he is wearing a ski mask. He ain't coming in for no chipwich.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. I guess I'd turn him into a pillar of salt.
Pillar of salt. You can do that?
Oh, you bet your. Yes, I can do that.
Well, I have to say your credentials are pretty impressive, Mr. Jehovah. I mean, your resume is good. It's a little unorthodox, but it's good.
Okay. But Mr. Word, if I could just say so, I really want this job. I mean, I think I'm perfect for it. You know, I'm a hard worker. I'm creative. I'm good with people.
Oh, a people person.
Yeah, yes,
That's good.
I'm a people person.
That is good.
It's just I really, Mr. Wordy, I really need this job.
Well, all right. You got the job.
Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Wordy. Thank you so much.
So now we pay $8 an hour. I presume that will be adequate.
Oh, that would be wonderful, Mr. Wordy. Thank you so much.
Okay, you will start this Sunday.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Mr. Wordy, I'm afraid I don't work on Sundays.
You don't work on Sundays?
No, I rest on Sundays. It's in my resume.
You rest? You know what? Get out of my office. There's a line of people that would work full weeks for me. Get out of my office.
I'm fired?
You're not even hired. Get out of here.
Well, fine, Mr. Wordy. I don't need this job anyway. They're taking applications at the new Wawa down the street.
Well, that would have been a bad idea. Hey, Janice, can you send in the next applicant? I have a Mr. Lou Seffer.
Thank you, suggestion. You know, the thing about a good idea, bad ideas in comedy is you get the test results immediately. If they're not laughing, it ain't going well. My sort of final thoughts here on this subject. I found myself going back to the wonderful director Harold Clurman, who was one of the founders of the group theater. And Clurman had a really illustrious career, but the fact is that he had a lot more bad ideas than he had good ones. He had many, many more flops than he did successes, hits. And it used to drive him crazy because everybody would just want to talk about the hits. And he was much more interested in talking about the flops. Because to him, The flops is where he learned everything. I mean, the flops was where the most interesting stuff was happening. The flops, without the flops, he felt he would never get to the hits. And people would say, well, why would you want to just talk about everything that went wrong? Why would you want to talk about flops? He said, come on, let's just face it. Flops are everywhere. I mean, life is a flop. I mean, let's face it. It ain't going to end well. So I've come to learn to try to embrace my bad ideas, to come up to that abyss and trust that somehow, some way, I'm going to make it over it. I'm going to get to the other side of the storm, because on the other side of the storm is ultimately where art lives. And, you know, you may end up with a sheet over your head and a sprained ankle, but you got to admit, the leap off the garage was a lot of fun. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, I'd be happy to take questions. Yes, hi.
You used painting analogy earlier. So on a spectrum, with Rembrandt at one end and Jackson Pollock at the other, where would you put your creative process?
So, Andy was wondering, with Rembrandt on one side and Jackson Pollock on the other, where would I find myself? It's funny, even when I was thinking about that analogy, I was thinking about Pollock, and I was like, okay, what was it like when he was painting? I mean, really, was it just sort of randomness? I mean, I did see the movie, and so you at least got to see I don't know how fictionalized or how accurate that portrayal was, but I found that if I had to just use that as a reference point of Pollock, that there was still that moment of not knowing what was going to happen. And at the same time, the fact that whatever came out wasn't where he finished. I find that it's funny, when I teach, particularly like in directing, I kind of talk to the students that say, well, you know, we're going to learn classical art. We're going to do the equivalent of that. We're going to learn how to kind of paint the nude, because we got to learn how to do that first before we can start to break all of the rules of what that is. And so I felt like, I feel like my origins is in Rembrandt, learning how to paint the nude, but there is so much power and suspense in putting ourselves into the world of Jackson Pollock. And I would say in some cases it depends on what I'm working on, because some pieces are going to skew themselves to that direction while others are going to skew themselves in the other way. If I'm working on a devised work, for instance, or even something like the And God Said Please piece, I just had the title. That was almost the extent of the idea. The rest was pouring paint and hoping for the best. Other pieces that I've done, though, particularly if I'm working with a conceived script, a Shakespeare or something like that, I feel that I owe something to the playwright, the creator of the idea, and to try to bring that idea out, and that's where I find myself going back the other direction to the older master. Right? Yes, right.
David, how much of your kind of drive to work through the life part of it, when it gets in your way, what you think was intrinsic for you versus something you learned? I find students often have a hard time going through that process, right? It's challenging, and to get to that other side where you see the rewards and can go through that several times.
I often wonder, like, what's nature and what's what evolves, because I would say by nature I've always, my mother can confirm this, I've always been a shoot first and ask questions later kind of person. And in some cases that's really bad, but in terms of creative work, it's probably pretty good. So I think by nature I've always been drawn towards chance. And I've always been willing to jump off with a certain degree of trust that I'll figure it out before I hit the ground. Now, going back on today's address, that wasn't always the case. But I'd have to say that I guess I'm always willing to go there. Maybe the key in that, and it depends, I wonder almost to a degree how much it depends on at what point you have that first moment of seeing the worth of it. I can imagine like if I hit that like 2 or 3 times straight without any glimmer of success, that is to say an outcome that really spoke to me and said that this was a good thing to do, I could see how that could really be a crushing thing. It could really crush it. And I find as a teacher, that becomes a really interesting balance to try to work with the students. Trying to find that element that fosters the desire to jump off the cliff and the concern that if at the same time you're trying to solidify and build technique and other aspects of art, and how do these two things work together? Even grading is so hard. I do an exercise. I've got to see a couple of my students here. I don't think any of them haven't done this exercise, so I'll talk about it. They sort of have to keep it a secret because I don't want other classes to know about it. It's a perplexing problem of fostering chance and the willingness to jump off a cliff, and at the same time figuring out how do I assess this and give you this hard, cold thing called a grade. Yes, yeah, good to see you.
I was just wondering how much, if anything at all, does being Jewish influence or factor into your artistry or your good and bad ideas or your delivery of them?
It's funny. I don't. It obviously does because a lot of my writing seems to be on there. But it's very interesting. Earlier in the How I Brought Peace to the Middle East piece, I talk a little bit about my Jewish upbringing, which I describe essentially as what is called Jewish minimalism. And it's like, can I say that we picked and choose those various aspects of Judaism that best sort of exhibited our tribal affiliation. I go on to say, Manischewitz. If you give me a glass of Manischewitz, I'll actually drink it. And so I'm always kind of surprised. I think it's snuck up on me. Obviously, it's there, despite the fact that it wasn't like a real centerpiece of how I grew up necessarily, but at the same time, it was always present. But one thing, though, it did do, and I think, because growing up in northern Vermont, we were the one Jewish family. So the entire Jewish contingency was me and my 2 sisters. And that was it. And so there was a degree of there was an underlying feeling of being an outsider, as subtle as it may have been, but it definitely existed. And I think there's maybe some power in that. And so I wonder to what degree that's really what has influenced me, and maybe that's what brings me back to why I've written at least 2 pieces where an aspect of my Jewish background have found their way into the art pieces. Right? Everybody else, are we good? One last? It's good to see you.
Nice to hear you, Kaye. I don't know your work extremely well, although soon after I came here I saw you in the David Mamet play Oleana.
Yeah.
I still see you as that.
I'm so sorry.
That's why I don't hate the play then, so that's good. But I just wanted to say, since you told us, or since we were told that we had the opportunity to do so, and since you are such a valued part of this community, that your parents should be publicly thanked now.
Oh. Thank you about that. You have no idea how much they need to be thankful. My poor mother, when I was a kid, she would show up at the high school production and go, "Why is our dining room table on the stage?" Nice. Well, everyone, I can't thank you enough for coming here. This was really, as anxiety-ridden as it might have been for me, it really is a thrill. I'm so indebted to this university, and I'm indebted to our college. It's been such a wonderful place to spend, I can't believe it, 20 years. It's been so rewarding. I'm so thankful to my colleagues in the Department of Theater and Dance because they have been so supportive of everything that I've done. To each and every one of you, as well as my parents. Thank you so much.